We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. The phone line's open, 737-7587 if you want to join us. Representative Michael Curcio is with us, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, talking about the Community Oversight Board and some of what his legislation would do in terms of setting some parameters on how, I guess, not just Nashville's, but any city's oversight board.
That's right, statewide application.
And so we can take your calls on that, and we can stray beyond that as we make our way through the show. But let's go to Joe, start things off this morning. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Joe, what's on your mind?
Just listening to your guest this morning explain this situation about the board. I think it's just, you know, it's another way to waste $150 million a year that we can't even give our Metro employees a cost of living raise. But my real question is about the gun permits. If he is versed on the trying to change the gun permits around and what that really amounts to, with having a concealed weapon permit or a handgun carry permit. If he's versed on that, I'd like to hear him kind of define that a little bit.
Sure. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you said, you may get some calls along those lines.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so Joe, I think what you're referring to is through our Judiciary Committee came a bill this year that would create a different layer of a permit. So right now in Tennessee, we are one of the states that requires a permit to carry a weapon. We don't just differentiate right now between a concealed carry or an open carry permit. You either have a permit or you do not. Yeah. And so what the legislation did, which came through our committee, would create a different layer of a permit. So the permit that we have right now would become what's called the enhanced permit. So you're range trained, you spent time in a classroom, and you can carry the most broad definition possible. So anywhere that you're able to carry a weapon, as long as you got the permit, you can do that with what would now become the enhanced permit. Okay. That's the permit that we have now. What the bill that Joe's referring to sought to do is to create a layer underneath that. So these are for folks who maybe don't carry nearly as often. They want to carry very, very occasionally. The example that was given in committee, and I can relate to this, my wife and I have 3 young children, is maybe a mother who very rarely but occasionally feels like she's going to an area where maybe she's concerned. She wants to be able to just to make sure that she could defend herself and her children if she needed to. But she's not carrying very often. So the requirements are a little bit less, but they can also carry fewer places. So it's not this kind of open access, so to speak, that the enhanced permit provides, but it's a different layer. So the idea is kind of which permit is right for you. Right. That was the concept. That's right. Just another option.
You know, I did a story last week. You know, we've had these carjackings cases that just keep happening, and more people are traveling with guns in the vehicle. And I hadn't known. Most Tennesseans don't realize, you know, that the Castle Doctrine was expanded to cars a few years back, as I'm sure you're aware. Which is interesting. You don't even have to have a permit. You can legally have a weapon in your car. Now the difference is, if you don't have the permit, then you can't take it out with you, which is an issue because then you leave the gun in the car, maybe it gets stolen. But I don't know. I think it's interesting that people can have that weapon, and you can certainly find ways to secure a gun in your car if you have a safe or otherwise. But more and more people are traveling with weapons now for the very reason you talked about, to protect yourself. You see all these carjackings. And we have
we are attacking now that theft issue that you talked about.
How do you address that? Because I'm not sure. I mean, because even if someone chooses not to have a permit and they have it in their vehicle, but maybe downtown living, their parking garage is 2 blocks from their condo. Right. And they park there. Well, even just carrying that gun without a permit from that garage to their condos, technically, and they want to be legal, not right. And so what do? How do you address that?
Well, so one of the things we've done, because we want to make sure we don't re-victimize victims. So there were some proposals that came forward that said, oh, well, if your gun gets stolen, then you should be punished in some way. That doesn't make any sense to me, because we're re-victimizing somebody that's already been victimized. So what we've done instead, right now the way theft law works, and I think this will make sense to you, is the punishment is a percentage of the value of the object that was stolen, and guns were treated the exact same way. Well, I've got a 30-year-old handgun. It's not worth a whole lot of money, but it's still very, very lethal. Sure. So what we're going to do is change the way theft is handled for an actual weapon of that nature. So one of the proposals that have come through is mandatory jail time.
It's more serious for stealing a gun.
Right. So if you steal a weapon, you're going to have mandatory jail time, and instead of looking at a percentage of the object, the value of that object, we're going to bump up the
that makes sense.
The financial penalty as well.
So someone can steal a gun, all right, that's worth maybe $50.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they get charged with some misdemeanor. Whereas, now, would it be a felony level, or do you think misdemeanor on what you're saying now in these enhancements if you steal a gun? So it would be like a gun theft enhancement.
That's right. So there's two different proposals that have come through. One that would be mandatory jail time, which I think gets somebody to you steal somebody's gun, you're going to spend 30 days in jail, period. The other one would increase the financial penalty. So they don't necessarily, I don't think they were intended to necessarily work in tandem with one another. I think it's, though, evident that our majority is wanting to attack this issue very, very seriously.
Interesting. I think that's a good idea. Let's go next to Ann. Ann, good morning. Hi, Ann.
Good morning.
Hey.
Knoxville has, for 20 years, like he said, had subpoena power, but they also have had a department that was very transparent. Therefore, that has made it so that the board never had to use subpoena power. Lebanon has had a community oversight board for years. They never had officers on their board because their department has always been transparent. Therefore, they've never had police officers, retired or present, serve on their board because their citizens have always had a transparent relationship. Those are two aspects in Nashville that are not transparent, which are reasons why the citizens of Nashville voted to set up their community oversight board with subpoena power and demographics to be filled in a certain way. Both issues you're fighting to change. The citizens of Nashville fought for 30 years to get this board set up in this way, and single-handedly, the FOP has started a smear campaign and has plastered the airways with miscommunication on salaries, on effects of the board, and this is wrong. The citizens of Nashville have never had transparency with the chief of police, nor have they had transparency for victims when something has gone wrong. This is why they need their board set up in the manner in which the voters voted.
Okay, and I know that you're a believer in the idea of transparency, but I think she might make a good point there in regard to, maybe there are other departments where the transparency is there and no subpoena power. In her opinion, she feels they don't have the same transparency here in Metro, and taking this away, maybe a subpoena power would be more valuable here than maybe in Knoxville, where apparently they didn't use it.
Well, I would say, first of all, you got to look back and see the circumstances under which the Knoxville board was created. So to say that they've always, it's always been a much rosier picture in Knoxville, for example, I think is inaccurate. There's a reason their board was also formed 20 years ago. That's exactly right. And so while the city of Nashville is going through some pain right now, and we are going through this very public dialogue, let's not forget that other cities have been in this position before. We will get through this as well. And again, when the city of Knoxville's police chief came and testified to our House Judiciary Committee, she said on the record, we didn't know we had subpoena power. So to this notion that the threat of subpoena has been successful in a city where the people who were working with this board didn't even know that they had the subpoena power, I think doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
But now that chief wasn't around when the subpoena when the oversight board took effect. I mean, is it possible?
That's true, but she would have a working knowledge of how it functions.
Sure, and she's right, I'm sure, that it hadn't been used, or maybe she didn't know that it was there. Is it? I guess some might say, all right, having the subpoena power is one reason maybe Knoxville became so transparent. They realized it, and so they went along with it. The fact that these have been around and now you're addressing it because Nashville, the biggest city in the state, has done it, why not let it go for a year and see how the heck it goes? We haven't even given it a chance, and changes are already being addressed. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard from folks who support this, that have come to you and asked you to do this now, but couldn't you have waited a year to see if it's just out of control or not? Kind of, you didn't take any action against Knoxville or Memphis, but now Nashville passes it now before it even really gets started. You're taking away one of its primary powers.
Well, I would actually argue exactly the opposite, which is we've given this over 20 years to percolate in the state, and so we've looked at a body of evidence and also looking at what's happened across the country for the last 60 years. So to say that we've sort of rushed to judgment, because I had that question on the House floor on Thursday, I would just say it's the exact opposite approach, that we've been looking at over a quarter century of data that says, okay, look and see how Memphis works, look and see how Knoxville works, and incidentally, Memphis's board fits within these guidelines already, and it functions very, very well. And so we had some real-life case study examples to say, okay, if we want our boards to be the best in the business and to follow these best practices, then let's create these outlines. And the other thing that I should mention as well that we hadn't really had a chance to get into, nothing in this bill would prohibit an elected body from using their subpoena power. So for example, in the Nashville Charter Amendment that enacted this Community Oversight Board, it references that they would have the same subpoena power as, quote, the elected body, the Metro Council does. And so these Community Oversight Boards would absolutely be able to go to the council, the elected representatives who are accountable to their constituents and their districts, and say, we feel the need to have this subpoena for this specific purpose, and then that elected body could proceed forward with that if they wanted to. And of course, they're answerable to their constituents, which I think it's the most appropriate place to put that power with folks who are accountable on a ballot, you know, every 2 years.
All right, let's go to Jonathan. Hi, Jonathan. Good morning. Good morning, Jonathan.
Yes.
What's on your mind?
Hey, Nick, how you doing?
Hey.
I just want to tell you thank you for the good job that y'all do for covering real journalism, and the great job that the chairman is doing. But I just wanted to point out, y'all did an investigation. I guess it was Ben Hall, I think it was last month, and according to Metro Police Chief Anderson, I believe that there were 108 officers understaffed, and then we've seen this recent, I guess it was gang of bikers or something roaming through Broadway, and I just was hoping maybe y'all could pick up on this and some of the lawlessness that seems to be going on among our juveniles here in Metro.
All right, well, you know what? Okay, listen, let's take a break on that, because that could kind of segue into some of the criminal justice reform. We were just talking about that beforehand. He saw the video this morning of that poor officer being dragged here in Metro through these, I don't know, these rogue gangs of bikers, and I don't know if gang's the right word, but they're cruising through some of the busy areas downtown and all of this. Crime in general is an issue. So those are good questions, Jonathan. Listen, we'll take a break, and I'll give the good representative a chance to address that as soon as we come back. We can take more of your calls as well, 737-7587, right after this.
This is Storm 5 Weather Update.